Hey, Christ is risen. Indeed, he is risen. I did that to poke the person in our green room. He's going to be joining us in just a minute. And that's you can't hear him right now. You can't hear him. It's Father Andrew Stephen Damick. Awesome. And he is an English. He's an English bachelor. This is so unfair. He can't come back at me right now. You can't hear him. But he's loading up right now. Trust me, he's loading up. But before we get to him, we've got to move into that place of peace. All right? So let's move into there with our usual exercise. We'll do this together. It's so nice to do this together. And I don't know about you, but it really helps me, not just as an exercise, but to do it with you. So let's do it. And we're going to breathe in slowly and say the first half of the Jesus prayer. We'll pause. We'll breathe out slowly and say the second half and pause. We'll do that 3 times. It'll take about a minute, and that's a minute well spent. Okay. Ready? Breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Last time for now. Breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Okay, resume breathing. See, wasn't that awesome? But here's something that's also awesome, is my dear friend. Let's bring him on. Let's bring up his mic. And hopefully he enjoyed all those blue peanut M&Ms in the green room. But there he is, Father Andrew Damick. Glory to Jesus Christ. Christ is risen.
He truly is risen.
He truly is risen, right?
Sorry, you're jumping around a little bit on my screen and kind of coming in and out, so it's not perfect, but whatever.
Yeah. Boy, there's a metaphor. So truly is risen. This is the preferred translation
for me.
Right, but you have, your opinion is not just random. Like, I may prefer something just because that's what I'm used to, right? But you put thought into these English word things, right? It's kind of your shtick.
Yes. Yeah. I won't go into the whole rigmarole as to why I prefer he truly is risen, but I'll just say that on the one hand, I think it's a better translation, and on the other hand, I think it's a better arranged way of saying it in English. You know, he truly is risen versus indeed he is risen, or truly he is risen, which doesn't sound like a big difference, but it is. But it also has the advantage of being used by hardly anyone. And so I'm not particularly taking a side other than my own side. I'm like an ant, you know, no one is entirely on my side. So.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, and yeah, so voistinu vos cres, yeah, in truth. Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, where are you, Father? Where are you? We can see this beautiful setting there. That is not an artificial setting. I believe that is real.
Yeah, no, that's real. This is not a simulated background. This is my office at St. Paul Orthodox Church in Emmaus, Pennsylvania. So I am not on a porch, but I am in an office, and I have, as you can see, I have a bunch of icons on the wall behind me. As every place in our homes really, ideally should have iconography, if possible. So, yeah, this is the good quiet place where I have all the bandwidth to myself, and it's just a good place to be. So yeah, thank God.
Yeah, right. Because that's one of the interesting things. I mean, we live in real homes. People know us as priests, and they know us within that context. But look, we're living real lives inside of our houses, right? And crazy happens all the time. I mean, at least in my house. I'm not speaking for you.
Ancient Faith wants to install a studio for me here in Emmaus. And the first question was like, so do you have someplace in your home that, that would work for this? And I was like, my house has 4 small people in it, in addition to the 2 big people. And even if I could find a space, it will never be quiet enough, except like in the dead of night. And even then, it'll never be quiet enough. So we're going to have to find some other place to do that. So, yeah, it's true.
Yeah. It's so cute, and right. We did a liturgy or services, Vespers, like and things in our house, right? And you set it up as best you can, right? You try to take into account all the random stuff that can happen. No, you can't. You can't. In the middle of something, you're guaranteed something is going to go sideways, and it does. So, yeah, awesome. So, how are things in Emmaus? What's going on there? What's the level of, I don't know, people going out and things?
So Emmaus, I think, is pretty. It's pretty sleepy right now, is my sense of it. I mean, I go out for the necessities, in my car, and we do go out for walks and so forth now. But my sense is that Emmaus is you're not seeing any kinds of congregating going on. Like, people aren't gathering in public spaces at all. It's probably from the point of the civil authorities, we're probably pretty compliant. I'm told that there are just next door in Allentown that people occasionally have complained about people gathering in places. But I mean, I haven't really been to Allentown in a month or so.
You're right.
Really. I mean, occasionally I cross the border into Allentown to go to the grocery store. Although I think that's really Salisbury Township, which is a snaky little township that is sort of insulates us from Allentown, geographically speaking. But yeah, Emmaus right now is pretty quiet, and but people are anxious to kind of get back to normal if at all possible. But right now there isn't that. Most of our local restaurants still seem to exist, which is good. None that have gone down as far as I can tell. They're all doing curbside pickup, and some are doing delivery. And this is a story that's happening all over the country and all over the world right now. And we're just trying to get through it as best as we can.
Right. And you're directly helping, a certain set of people there get through it as best you can. What does that look like there at St. Paul?
Yeah. So until just recently, for a while now, the way we've been doing church has been, the only thing happening in the building is church services. And we were on a pretty limited schedule, and we were a pretty limited personnel. So initially, a while back, we were allowed to have 10 people, just functioning and trying to keep the services going. And then we were reduced to just 5, and which was a big challenge, actually, and especially during Holy Week and Pascha. Although I know there's one of my brother priests nearby. His choir director, and I think his assistant choir director, and kind of anybody else who normally helps him is either at a higher risk group because of their medical condition or age, or, like, for instance, works with people who are higher risk or whatever. And so as a result, he literally did Pascha completely by himself in his church. So, I mean, obviously he couldn't do the Divine Liturgy, but he could do some other stuff. And so it was solo, him in this big church. live streaming it. And I heard that, and I just thought, man, and here I was complaining. I was saying, oh, we only get to have 5 people, and literally he was down to 1 just because of that was their situation, and it's still the case there now that's what they're doing, just because of the way that the conditions are. And but this last weekend we got to open it up to just a handful more people, which was, it's funny. My initial just emotional response to that was, okay, this is going to be a big hassle, because now I have to sign people up, and I can't just say come to church. It's going to be limiting, whatever. And that was just my initial emotional response, was I feel like I just gotten this pattern down, and now I have to change. Which of course is not a voice that I should listen to, because we were being told you can now allow a handful of people in, and so. We used an online sign up, and people started signing up. And so now we can have our skeleton crew plus 5. And so, we had 10 people total in church on Sunday morning. But the thing that I noticed actually when I looked out at Vespers on Saturday night, and there were now, I think 9 people in the church. Actually, I felt this just joy, even though we're still limited and still nowhere near what we should be. There was still a joy to be able to have at least some people together with us, and also just to look out and see on their faces. I mean, some of them had not been to church in 2 months, and just they had a joy to be there. And I know that there are a lot of people that there's a lot of anxiety and even anger and protest and so forth over all these things. And I get that. And I mean, I feel much the same way. I don't want to tell people not to come to my church. I mean, that's crazy. Why would I ever want to say that to someone? But that's kind of where we are right now. But what I noticed, though, is that the way that at least my parish has been responding has not been that way. I'm sure they've had those feelings. But the way that they've largely responded is with gratitude for the ways that we're trying to connect with them, whether through live streaming or, checking in on people or whatever it might be. And then, when I said, okay, now 5 people can come to services in addition to the skeleton crew, people started signing up, and responding happily. So that's a good sign to me, and I think it speaks of a certain maturity and faith of the people in my congregation. And it's not that I think badly of them, but a part of a pastor's job is to always be pushing people to be higher and better, than we have been. And so it's nice to be beautifully surprised. Not that I expected them to be rattling the cage. I didn't. But it's been beautiful just to see them respond with love. Right. So
yeah, there are many ways to set this up, and that's wonderful. And I don't know if your ears were burning, but we were talking about you last week with Cyril about the wonderful harmonious culture that has been cultivated, not just by you, but just in general there, right? And it's beautiful to just go there and plug in and to soak in that peace. It's fantastic. Over at Anaxios, they've offered this note program. I like your sign-up sheet, but there's a better way to do this, And the better way is to auction off those places in liturgy.
Hey, it's a fundraiser at the same time. What a fantastically terrible idea.
Yeah, awful idea. Don't do this, y'all. Don't do this. Do not call my bishop. That was a joke. Okay, we are not selling indulgences. We are not selling places in the liturgy. That's horrible.
Although that's a thing. Hopefully not right now, but there have been churches. I don't think Orthodox churches. I hope not anyway. But some churches in the past that the way that they would do stewardship is you would pay for your seat. And the more you would pay, the better a seat you would get in the church. And for instance, I know that one of the Methodists, at least at one point, the Methodist tradition had this, which is why then it gave birth to what was called the Free Methodist Church, which, unlike most churches that start with the word free or have the word free in them somewhere, was not about being free of government control, which is, people always say there's two kinds of free, right? There's free as in free speech, and then there's free as in free beer. This wasn't, the Free Methodists weren't free as in free speech. It was free as in free beer, as in, not that they were giving free beer, but it was free to go, and you could sit wherever you liked, and you didn't have to pay for your seat. So like that is a thing that really, or at least has been a thing. I don't think it's a thing anymore in most places, but that doesn't prevent even all of our churches now are free as in free beer in terms of their seats, but that doesn't prevent certain families from claiming certain regions of the seating in the church, such that if someone unexpected arrives and is there, they might get a look.
Yeah, that's sad. Father Theophan just said that my audio is very quiet. Sorry about that. I'm competing with the wind, I think, is what's going on. But people are here to hear Father Andrew anyway. So, but Father Theophan, thanks. I appreciate that. So one of the things we've been doing in our parishes to help during this time is live streaming. Whenever we can, we live stream stuff. And I get it. It's important, and it allows people to feel connected and this. But it's our experience of church is not the ideal for this medium, right? We do it as a stopgap, but there are other ways that we do use technology, and it's very useful for evangelization, and that is the kind of stuff that you spend a lot of your time on, I assume. I mean, you've got such wonderful podcasts and such a tremendous online ministry. It's a real blessing, and this is very much needed right now, and it's going to be, this is my opinion, it's going to be even more needed in the coming year or two as we recover not just our economies and our health, but also recover from, I don't know what to call it, whether to call it trauma, that I don't think that's quite right. But we want to get the gospel out there because people need to know the comfort and the joy and the hope that comes from being in Christ. Can you talk about that and how Ancient Faith Radio is really set up for that?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that was interesting to me was, when we first started having big restrictions that we then had to respond to in some way, like most pastors, I started preaching about it or writing about it. It's just natural. I mean, if you're in ministry, you want to try to respond to what is actually happening in people's lives, and this is the thing that's happening for everybody right now, and it's kind of crazy how much of the world is gripped by it. But one of the things that was interesting to me was to see how much content Ancient Faith Radio, Ancient Faith blogs immediately began to produce as a result of this. And I mean, I know them well. The people who the staff of the ministry and a lot of the, and so forth. I've worked with them now for close to 11 years. And I know that there actually was not coordination, right? Ancient Faith didn't say, okay, you content creators, start doing stuff about COVID-19. They didn't do that. But what they did do is they saw that the writers and the speakers and so forth began to write and to speak about this, and they said, okay, we can curate and collate this stuff together, and so then now you can go to kind of have a one-stop shop of responses and pastoral care and comments and thinking and all, so many different angles to try to understand and respond to what we're all suffering from right now. And I thought that kind of spoke to the way that one of the ways that Ancient Faith works best. Now there is a coordinated side to what they do. Like they do say to particular content creators, like, would you be interested in doing something about this, right? But in this case, it was almost spontaneous and without coordination, right? There wasn't a sense of, okay, everybody, let's work on this together. Now, you could say that maybe they should do that, but it seemed to be pretty clear that they didn't really need to like put out marching orders, because I mean, that's not the way the ancient faith works anyways, right? Almost everybody that creates stuff for them does so because they want to make that stuff. And maybe they're making it as part of their vocation. Otherwise, like for pastors are already preaching and already writing. But there's a lot of other people that are doing stuff too. And what ancient faith does is with certain trusted people provides a platform for them to do that. So it's a trusted relationship and there's a mutual benefit, right? And so, during this particular crisis, the way that most people have stayed in contact and the way that now most people are getting any kind of church connection or pastoral care or any of that stuff is almost all remotely, which is just staggering to think about. And if you think about what the conditions must have been like at other times when there were general quarantines going on, which has happened before, like this has actually happened in the history of the church before where church doors were closed or things were limited or whatever, that people basically just had to kind of hunker down in their homes, and that was what they had. And if one of them started dying, for instance, if it was before the invention of the telephone, the priest may not have even known until after the person was already dead, for instance, So it's interesting, like, I had to do a funeral in the midst of this, not someone who died of this disease, but it was another cause. And I've known of other clergy who've had to do funerals in the midst of this. And it's they talk about their particular struggles about trying to do a funeral in these conditions and how hard it is. And it's interesting to me that that's kind of new, because there was a point in the past probably when we couldn't have done that at all. Or maybe it would just looked very different. But yeah, so, ancient faith, it's a media ministry, and they do multiple kinds of media. So a lot of people think of Ancient Faith Radio, which has two sides to it: live streaming, and then also podcasts. So you can download something after it's already been recorded. But there's also, there's other sides to what Ancient Faith does too. There's Ancient Faith Publishing, which makes books, both print books and ebooks. And there's Ancient Faith Film, which hasn't really produced a lot of stuff yet. But there's a handful of things that are associated with Ancient Faith Film, largely projects that other people are doing and then kind of affiliating with Ancient Faith. They're just doing the distribution. And of course, there's Ancient Faith blogs as well, which actually I had a hand in helping to found a few years ago. So a significant side, not all, but a significant side of what Ancient Faith does is about online content delivery. And so suddenly everyone is doing almost everything online, and without any kind of like I said, without any kind of really major coordinated effort. Ancient Faith as just kind of a community of people who make stuff, and then also the professional staff who support that content creation and delivery, just sort of simultaneously leaped into action. I was very impressed by this. To me, it was like a no-brainer. Like, of course, I should be talking about this and writing about this. And my guess is that that's exactly what happened for everybody. It's like, well, this is what's on all our minds, so let's do this. And it's been really encouraging for me and inspirational for me to see this. And not every response to our current crisis has been helpful and positive. There's been a lot of anger and so forth, and I get that. Like, I get the anger, but my thought always is, okay, we're in a difficult situation. What can I say that's going to help draw people closer to Christ? Is what I'm doing that? Or am I creating enmity and feeding anger and resentment and all that kind of stuff? And so I've taken, and I'm used to this, I've been on the internet for almost 30 years now. So I've taken some heat from some people basically saying like, why aren't you rattling the cage? Why aren't you demanding the opening of churches? Why aren't you, calling bishops to task and whatever, and governments? And like there's part of me that would kind of like to do that. But at the same time, my approach has not been like this situation shouldn't exist, but rather, okay, this is our situation. So what can we do to draw closer to Christ in this? And, just the other day, I know this is becoming kind of like a long ramble now, but yesterday I just had a mental reminder and there's that verse in where is it? Is it in 1 Corinthians? I'm looking this up now here. Sorry, 1 Thessalonians. I just remembered that line, "In everything give thanks," right? And so I thought, this is definitely a situation which we should give thanks because it's in everything, and this is part of everything, but especially, right? But also, that's passage. It's from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and it says this. I just want to read this because to me, this is my ministry philosophy. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. And that's 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 16 through 18. And I feel like those should be our watchwords during this crisis. Even if I'm leveling criticisms at people, maybe that are good criticisms, am I also praying without ceasing? Giving thanks and everything, rejoicing always. If those things are not present, then I'm doing it wrong. Yeah. I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah, and you are preaching to the choir right now because for me, the biggest witness I can bring to this is the witness of peace and generosity. We are so polarized, and it's polarizing our Christian communities as well. And we can't have that. We need to be one. God wants us to be one as He is one. And yeah, it's important that we get things like policies and responses right, but you can get a policy right, in a way that minimizes risk while maximizing other things, and just it not matter because we've lost our soul. And the way that we are tempted to snipe at each other and to assume the worst about each other is just that's what I am called to help heal as a pastor. And yeah, the Ancient Faith Radio, such a blessing to so many of us, right? And I have appreciated the things about the coronavirus, the response to that. But for me, also what it is just reaching out for good content, right? Right. And just having something that's kind of beautiful to fall back on, right? And so, the work that you're doing on Tolkien is just, it's so tremendous and even more necessary now, right? Because there's only so much of this, measuring risk and pastoral response that I can take, right?
Yeah, right. I need right. When I was working on my sermon for yesterday, I sat down to write it and I thought, I don't want to talk about the virus today. So I talked about Tabitha of Joppa, who shows up and is raised from the dead in the reading from Acts, and I did not mention the thing because I'm just like, okay, there's only so much of this I can take, and it's not a matter of like being escapist, like how dare you not talk about the thing we're all talking about every single moment. It's that, and it's also not just, well, life goes on and life needs to go on. Right. It's not that either, although I think that's an important thing. Like life needs to go on and we still need to just live. Right. But also that the kingdom of God is the story. Everything else, even this major worldwide pandemic where hundreds of thousands of people are dying, is just a piece of that story. And so it's good to talk about pieces of the story, but it's not the whole story. And what gives us hope in the midst of all this stuff is that there is this bigger story. the story. The kingdom of God is the thing that's happening, and he's ruling in the midst of his enemies. That's why there's all kinds of bad things happening, because he's still in the midst of his enemies, but he is ruling. And so that's the thing that we talk about. And like you mentioned this stuff with Tolkien, and I think that Tolkien is great because precisely because, and he was willing to accept this term because it is escapist. Now so there's in one of his essays, I think it's on fairy stories, he says, he's countering this as a criticism, like, well, fantasy is just escapist, right? You're just trying to essentially, you're just sort of in denial, and you just want something that's going to take you away for a while, and serious people shouldn't do that, right? Or it's a weakness or an indulgence, whatever. And he says, yeah, it's escapist. He said, but if a man is in a prison cell, shouldn't he want to escape? So he essentially says, yes. And what you call reality, what you call the real world, the serious world, that's actually a prison, because you're not allowing yourself to even consider the possibility that there's something outside your cell. Right. And the great thing about what Tolkien does is he paints this amazing picture of something that is outside the cell. And even though what he's writing is fiction, he's not claiming this happened, although he kind of puts that on as a sort of a trope, like he describes it as being history, right? But he as he also knows, it's feigned history, right? That painting that picture of what's outside the cell helps us to develop the longing for what's outside it, and we begin to actually look for ways to escape, because that's reality. The cell is not what the reality is. It is real, but it's just a little piece of it. There's a whole unseen realm. There's all kinds of things that you don't know about or you haven't seen. And I think that, for instance, music does much the same kind of thing. And it's interesting to me that when Tolkien writes his version of the creation story, it's done through music. There's something about music that, even if you close your eyes, you don't see something, you are, in a sense, in another world, especially the really good music. I mean, there is music that just kind of reduces you to your place. It's not that good. It might be fun or whatever for the moment, but there is music that takes you out, and it's not escapist in the sense of denying reality. It's escapist in the sense of helping you to escape from the prison cell of your own limited perceptions and your own limited opinions and whatever. So yeah, I think it's really important, especially, it can become almost too much to just be talking about the virus 24/7. And that's one of the reasons I don't watch TV news. I haven't watched TV news in years. The only time I catch it is if I'm in a doctor's office or a restaurant or something, and there it is on the TV, or because they give undue weight to whatever is hot in the moment, because I know that's what gets them ratings. But I can't spend all my time doing that. That doesn't mean I'm not paying attention to the moment, but it's not the only thing, and indeed it's not even most of the thing. It's just a little bit of the thing.
Right. And so they have an incentive to, they don't cultivate beauty. They don't foster our ability to appreciate the good things in the world. None of that is done on the news. It's just not, and it's not even all that great at keeping us informed, right? And it also it seems to be set up. It has an incentive, financial incentive, to divide us, to further polarize us, and that's also not good. So yeah, stepping outside of this, I don't watch it either. I don't. It's just it's like poison. It reminds me. So we got rid of our cable TV and all that kind of stuff a long time ago. So my kids have grown up just with things like Netflix and Apple TV. So they're not used to commercials. It's like you were saying, when you go into the doctor's office and you see the news, you're like, man, that's crazy land, right? And that's kind of like what it is when we travel. We turn on the TV and there are these commercials. And I remember my kids were young. They were like, I want. You're like, no, that's crazy land. Stop. Right?
And you can see it's funny being dissociated from it. You can see how it sort of controls you, or attempts to control you. And yeah, it's interesting to me to watch my kids when they happen across a commercial. It's like works on them, whereas I'm like, oh, it's a commercial, which is, and they think that just shows that I was raised with commercials, that I've become desensitized to them. Right. And it just doesn't work on me anymore, which is why commercials have to get louder and crazier and more shocking and whatever, yeah.
There we go. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Say, just a shout out real quick. We've got Deacon Adrian Mazur with us, and I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, and he's a chaplain in New York City, and he got it. He got the crud, right? So God bless him. It's good to see you here with us. Our prayers have been for you and for all of those who are sacrificing themselves to serve others. And we're really so indebted to everyone who is keeping us going in a difficult time. Yeah. Back to this idea. So where can you go to get the good things in you cultivated, right? Where can you go to help you become the person that you want to be, the person that lives in a world that is full of beauty and glorious mystery and grace and, dare I say, magic, right? Where can you go to get that kind of thing? You can't get it, for the most part, unless you're very selective, from our, entertainment industry, right? But Ancient Faith Radio explicitly has that mission. And what I like about it, it's not the case. So, Flannery O'Connor, she said, look, if you want to do good fiction, good Christian fiction, just be a Christian who writes good fiction, right? Don't try to do anything else. And that's what I see that's one of the reasons why I love your show on Tolkien, is because y'all are just sharing a love of story, a love of this witness, a love of this magic. And of course you're doing it in an Orthodox fashion, but it's only because you're Orthodox. It's not like you're trying to, pull stuff out to, reinforce the theology and the dogmas of Orthodox Christianity or anything. No, beauty just is, and if you share it, people are drawn to it.
Yeah, we now have, I think, 24 episodes of the Amun Sul podcast, which is this podcast that you're mentioning. And I don't think that there's yet been a one where, in the prep for the episode, that my guest co-host and I had to say to each other, okay, now let's make sure that we find a Christian take on this. While I'm delighting in trolls or whatever, I don't have to say, okay, wait, what's the Christian reading on trolls? Let's find a verse. We're not doing that. We're just sharing, the thing. And as you said, of course we're speaking about it as Orthodox Christians. There's lots and lots of Christian content in what we're doing as a result. But yeah, one of our mutual friends, Father Stephen DeYoung, likes to sometimes say the Bible is more Orthodox than you thought it was. And which is a kind of a similar sort of idea to this. Like, sometimes Orthodox Christians will look at the Bible and try to sort of make it Orthodox, like it's sort of too generically Christian, and so we need to make it Orthodox, And he's like, you don't really need to do that. You just kind of really need to read what's there and read it well, And I feel the same way about the whole world. Like the world is Orthodox. And by that, I don't mean everybody is an Orthodox Christian or that there's no heresy out there. Or I don't mean that. That's not what I mean. But rather that this is God's creation. Full stop. So since it is God's creation, then that means, and if Orthodox Christianity is the true faith, and I believe that it is, if that's the case, then that means there's not this thing over here that's Orthodox Christianity, and then everything outside of it that I have to try to make Orthodox, right? So theoretically our topic here today is evangelism. And I came across again, I can't remember who said this. I think maybe St. John Chrysostom, but there's this great saying. It doesn't matter to me who says it. And he said, whoever said it said, for some people, their parish is their world, but for others, the world is their parish. And I'm in the latter camp. The world is my parish. Um, the world is my church. And that doesn't mean that everything that's in the world or everything you see or whatever is aligned with the will of God. That's not what it means, but rather that there's nothing outside of God's love and ministry and sovereignty. And if that's the case, and if I'm his servant, then that means that my mission is everywhere. And it's not to try to turn things into an orthodox brand, whatever. It's to show how the truth that's in it is God's truth. It does already belong to the church, and then to try to cultivate that as best as possible, right? So, I mean, like a great example is one that occurs to me a lot at this time of year because, we're sort of amateur gardeners at my house. My wife, much more than I am. I am the amateur gardener assistant at best. She's the one who's actually doing the gardening. I'm giving assistance. But when we plant a seed or put a flower that we bought at the store and put it in the ground or whatever, we're not trying to make something happen. You can't make vegetables come. You can't make these things. You can't make flowers come, right? But what you can do is take what is already there, what God created, and use your sub-creative faculty. It's another good Tolkienian term, sub-creation, and to shape and reshape these things together for what God created to show forth in full flower, right? So, the same is true with evangelistic work. And, if we have the sense of being against the world, then we're getting it wrong. The world might be against us, but I'm not against the world. That doesn't mean I approve of everything out there, right? But if approval is the way in which I engage the world, I either approve or I disapprove, then I'm not doing evangelism.
No, but
right?
Evangelism, Father Theophan, he likes to speak about the evangelism of being kind. It's the sacramental effect of love. It's the fact that the world is made in a certain order, and when we act according to that order, it becomes more beautiful, right? And like you're saying, yes, it happens. The most concentrated way is in that parish life, right? In the mysteries of the church. But the mystery is everywhere because God is everywhere, right? Everything. So we're out there, we're making the crooked ways straight, not by hitting it over with the Jesus stick or anything like that, but just with our love, often with our patience, sometimes with a stern word. Yeah, okay, fine. But in this moment, I keep going back to the people are trying so hard to be correct, to be right, and to point out how others are wrong, coming at it sideways and just kind of saying, I love you, right? It steps out of the debate, and you do the same thing. So yes, we need to occasionally preach on the coronavirus. This is how we need to respond. These are the temptations and stuff. But to show, no, there's another way. There's still beauty in this world. Look, did you notice this part in The Lord of the Rings? I bet you never noticed this, right? You're like, oh, you're right. There's more beauty in this world than I thought. And we're in that same camp where, the world is the parish. And that is incredibly liberating in this moment when we are having to do so much outside of our parishes, right? We used to get the continual reminder of how love works, how community can just bring so much joy into our lives. We don't have those regular reminders anymore. And so where do we go to get that? We turn on our news and there's people just blah, 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 right? hating each other. The world is division. The world is all terrible things. Where can we go to find the gospel of hope, the gospel of joy, the gospel that is our inheritance as human beings who are united to Christ, right? And I really appreciate all the content creators at Ancient Faith that just putting stuff out there so that we can have beautiful things to remind us who we are, and that the church has joy no matter what the worldly circumstances are. Right? We have so many great examples of that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I've been really happy, for over a decade now to be working with them, and we have a really great partnership, and I don't know, the more I can do with them, the better, I think. And like one of the things, not that this isn't supposed to be like an extended advertisement for Ancient Faith, but I just hope that people who maybe aren't familiar, they'll check it out, or who are, that they'll appreciate it more. But one of the things that's happened has been this, because of the actual conditions of the pandemic, most churches closing their doors, a significant piece of Ancient Faith's income stream was just cut off, like turned off like a faucet, which is their wholesale side, right? So wholesale, that's when a bookstore orders from a publisher and then they resell at a higher price than they bought it for, which is at a discount. Okay. And for, a Christian publisher like Ancient Faith, that means church bookstores. There aren't that many Orthodox Christian, just independent bookstores out there who are selling their stuff. It's almost all from church bookstores, or from churches ordering like for, Sunday school classes or for Bible studies or whatever. Right. So with churches closed, church bookstores weren't ordering anything, which makes total sense. Like my church bookstore hasn't been ordering anything, not from anybody, not from Ancient Faith, not from anywhere else, because no one is shopping currently, right? And that's a big piece of Ancient Faith's income, and it's about 1/3, actually, which is that's a big chunk. And it's not everything. So there's also retail sales. There's also donations. These things all kind of go into what supports. I think they have about 17 or 18 staff members, right? So it supports their payroll, and then it supports expenses. So there's expenses. Ancient Faith Radio has, it costs to have servers and a big internet connection and office space. There's a studio. It costs to pay the people who maintain all those things. There's also expenses from the publishing side, whether it's printing or shipping or, warehouse, editors. There's all kinds of things. Ancient Faith Radio also has producers that they pay to do the editing and so forth. So everybody who produces content for Ancient Faith, even if they don't do it in a way that gets them paid, like way authors get paid royalties, most podcasters are not getting paid at all. Ancient Faith is spending money on them in order to help all these things happen. So it wasn't everything that Ancient Faith takes in when church bookstores close, but it was a major piece. And, if you've ever been in business, you know that if you just say, okay, I'm just going to shut off 1/3 of your income, for most businesses, that means just death, unless you have some massive profit margin, which they don't. It's a nonprofit organization, right? They don't have a massive profit margin. And so, without getting into the specific numbers, I know that, for instance, that the losses that they took in 1 month were greater than their total payroll for that month. Now, payroll is not their only expense, but it's their biggest expense, right? And so, if you're taking that kind of loss and you start taking that month after month, then that becomes an existential threat to the ministry. And so as a result, Ancient Faith basically said, well, what can we do about this? And they started pursuing multiple avenues, talking to some people who might be able to give like matching donations. And I know that discussion is happening, but also just kind of putting it out there to the world to say, okay, world, okay, people who listen to Ancient Faith, who read our stuff or whatever, do you want us to continue to exist after this pandemic is over? If you do, we could use your help right now. And so they did it's got a few days left in it, actually. There's a campaign going on called a regatta. So the idea is it's different boats, different teams racing each other. And my team is named the Buckleberry Ferry, which is a little raft in the Lord of the Rings that gets the hobbits across the Brandywine River so they can escape from one of the ring wraiths. Okay. So I just thought it would be amusing. Other people are naming their ships, HMS this and USS that or whatever. And I like, that's awesome. That's beautiful. It's great. I was like, but mine is going to be a little raft with some hobbits and a pony. And so, when I put my team together, we put this out there, and I figured, they said, okay, you should aim for like $3,000 as your goal for each team, and I thought, oh man, $3,000. I was a little vain. I said, I feel like we could do better than that, and so I put out a $10,000 goal. I was like, okay, everybody, let's do $10,000, help. So I put that out, and on an afternoon, late afternoon, and then the next morning I logged in and we had raised $10,000. And I was like, okay, everybody, let's do $15,000. And by that evening, we had reached $15,000. And so anyway, because people have responded so well, I just kept bumping up my goal or whatever until I finally got to 30,000, which as of just last night, we finally reached 30,000. And I was like, well, there's just a few days left. I'm not going to push it anymore. I'm just going to help maybe promote some of the other teams, but all of that is to say, that I think people see a value in what's being done. I certainly do. Even if okay, so I have some books with ancient faith, so I get a little bit in royalties, and let's face it, no one makes a living off of royalties except for a handful of people who are on New York Times bestseller lists, and they better be on that list every year if they want to keep making a living, right? Most people are not making that much money off of royalties. It's just not. So even if I weren't making anything, even the little bit that I am, I would still be pushing this because I believe in this mission. It's just like even in the opposite case where you could draw a specific line between an ask for giving and what someone's living. Like, for instance, when I stand up in my church and say, you guys need to tithe, you need to give, right? Yes, you can draw a line between their giving and my ability to make a living. It's true, right? That's the way most parishes work. But I'm not doing that because I want to make a lot of money, because I don't make a lot of money. I'm doing that because I'm saying, look, we have a mission, and if you share this mission with me, let's do this. And this is the way we're going to organize it. This is what's effective, right? There's been a couple. It's been interesting. Whenever there's a big push for something like that, there's always going to be, if there is a really strong, beautiful response, which there really has been, there's going to be criticism as well, right? So, for instance, some people have said, well, maybe the big loss in sales is because ancient faith is just garbage, or they're allowing too much garbage, and so people are losing confidence, and so maybe you should do some soul searching, ancient faith ministries, because this is a sign, right? The people are speaking, right? And so that's a plausible explanation, but it doesn't actually make sense in terms of if you really look at the numbers. And Ancient Faith recently had there was a private video conference with the content creators in which the leadership of Ancient Faith just showed us the numbers, to say, this is our actual situation. They just put it out there, right? And they showed okay, look, donations are continuing to go up. Retail sales, which means someone actually going to their website and buying a book for themselves or for somebody else, whatever, is going up. This one category of income, bam, just suddenly stopped. So, it's pretty obvious that this is because of the pandemic and because of church bookstores closing. And also, lots of other Christian publishers, like even some of the really big ones, like Lifeway, which is associated with the Southern Baptists. Some of these, they're experiencing exactly the same things. They're taking massive hits because nobody is ordering Sunday school materials or vacation Bible school materials. Like it's just this one category of stuff that's directly from churches who are closed. So anyway, I mean, I'm kind of gone on and on like this or whatever, but there's still a few days left. So if you have benefited, if you believe in the mission of what Ancient Faith is doing, then go. You can go to ancientfaith.com and you'll see links on there, and you can help. You can help by contributing something, even if it's just a little bit. This is not a fundraising video, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. And I'll also say the same thing that Ancient Faith always does, which is give to your parish first. Give to your parish first. Don't let your parish suffer because of this. If you are able, now, if you've lost your job or your income has taken a hit, it's completely reasonable for you, to go to your priest, go to your stewardship team or whatever in your parish and just say, look, I have to back off a little bit. I'm sorry. That's understandable, right? I'm not going to be like one of these televangelists who says, well, if you've lost your job and you have no income, you must still give your 10% or whatever. Now, I know of people who are doing that because that's what they want to do. And they believe that they should do that and so forth. And I get that, but it's also completely understandable to say, okay, I don't have the resources I once did. I need to back off a little bit just so I can still feed my family and whatever, because that family that you got to feed has to come first. God has given them to you as your ministry.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful.
So do those things first.
Right. Yeah. Fantastic. And that's what I wanted people to see, is to see your heart on this. We're doing this because we love the mission, we love the gospel, and we know that Ancient Faith Radio is a fantastic way to spread the gospel. That's why we do it, right? That's why we generate content and put it on there.
That is my vested interest.
That's it. That's it. That's what we live for. Because and over the next couple of years, the diseases of despair, we've already been hurting. I mean, you're in Pennsylvania. My goodness, how many people are suffering from those diseases of despair? Not just within that Allentown area, but especially as you move an hour or two away, right? This malaise is going to hit us so hard. And despondency has one real answer, and that is Christ, right? Christ and recovery. And how do you get people to know Christ? How do you get them to unite their life with Christ? Yeah, we're going to keep doing parish ministry. That's where the real work happens. But that may not be the way that they hear the word the first time. But Ancient Faith Radio, the content is of such quality that it's not just Orthodox Christians, sharing content with other Orthodox Christians, right? The content is of such a quality that people are going to listen and say, wow, I never thought, for example, with Amun Sul, I never thought that about Tolkien. But yeah, the world really is beautiful in the same way that I love it being beautiful in Middle Earth, right? So, and Father, if I can say it, just God bless you and all your work. I mean, we have benefited so much out here from the time that you put into this ministry. It's a blessing to all of us. Yeah, thank God, right? And one thing I'll say as a parish pastor is that in a lot of ways, Ancient Faith is like having a staff that I don't have. They are doing catechism for me. I mean, I do have people who do catechism, right? But they are doing catechism for me. They are doing evangelism for me. They are doing certain kinds of pastoral care for me. Like all of these things are happening. People in my parish are benefiting. People who are outside my parish are becoming part of my parish precisely because of this stuff. And so, a lot of Orthodox churches, at least in the United States, have precisely one employee, and it's somebody like us, and so they often don't have like a staff doing lots of other things. And this ministry functions in many ways as a parish staff, doing all kinds of stuff to support and to even make possible the ministry that we do. I can say, look, read this or listen to this or watch this. And,
a lot of that work has been done for me and done better than I can do it, right? By people who are better at it or more experienced at it or whatever. So that's one of the things I think is so important for, participating in and supporting this work that they do, is like by donating to Ancient Faith or by telling someone about Ancient Faith or whatever, you are literally helping every single Orthodox parish in the English-speaking world and even beyond it. Like, I'm aware of people who are converting to Orthodoxy because of stuff they're listening to on Ancient Faith who are in other countries, but because they know some English or there's a handful of Spanish things on Ancient Faith, then they're able to connect with that. So you are literally helping the world, by supporting this.
Yeah, and there are other ways to support too, right? Like money's tight. Hey, I get it. But if you go on and you like and you share positive comments about these podcasts, right? Because it's in a world of other podcasts, right? And again, the quality. If you love it, other people are going to love it. And I don't just listen to Orthodox podcasts. I listen to all kinds of podcasts, right? It can go the other way too, right? It's crazy to think that it wouldn't, right? So,
right.
Well, Father Andrew, I appreciate you taking the time out of this morning. I'm sorry you didn't bring Danishes from Egypt Star. I miss me some Egypt Star.
Yeah, well, I don't want to develop too much of the Corona gut. That's the thing now.
I do know, as a matter of fact. Well, it's time for us to wrap up, but can you offer a good word for all of our listeners?
I think the good word that I would offer is simply that I'm going to just read those verses again from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. In everything give thanks. For this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you.
It doesn't get better than that, thank God. And we're very thankful for one another, or the friendship that we share. We're thankful for all of you taking the time to come on and watch this. If you liked it, go ahead and hit like. If you like it a lot, go ahead and subscribe and share it with friends. And again, I do encourage you to find ways to support evangelism, find ways to support Ancient Faith Radio. And, you can go on right now, go on to iTunes or whatever and just offer a nice comment. Man, I sure do love this podcast. All right, everybody, until next time, Godspeed.